Ladies and gentlemen, Dragonflight Season 2 is here, and with it comes the return of Mythic Monday, where we take a look at Mythic Plus through the eyes of healers. In this video, we're going to look at the upcoming healer meta, the dungeon difficulty, talk about next week's possible affixes, and, of course, the random thought of the week, how to approach week 1 of a new season. Let's get into it. So let's start with the healer meta. Here's the sub-creation healer tier list for the final week of Dragonflight Season 1 going into Season 2. Again, these are just the stats based off of plus 22 to plus 29 keys for the week, guys, not my personal tier list. The biggest thing that's going to change balance-wise for Season 2 from right now is going to be tier sets, but it's unlikely many people will be getting 4 or even 2 set next week. So the biggest factor that's going to affect the meta is going to be how the healing specs interact with the dungeons themselves. You also need to consider the role of a healer early in a season versus late in a season. I'd say early in a season, especially before inevitable dungeon nerfs begin rolling out. Healing throughput is more highly valued. We're not well geared yet. We aren't that familiar with mechanics, so it's hard to imagine everything going super smoothly very often, let alone getting in a group with people using defensives or immunities at the right times. As a season progresses, usually the healing job gets a little easier and damage becomes a bigger factor. So that said, I'd still imagine Resto Druid and Resto Shaman are going to be looking really good next week. Learning a new dungeon pool on Disc Priest can be pretty daunting as you figure out how to time your ramps and burst damage, but I for one will definitely be hitting up some disc keys anyway. Another interesting factor at play here is going to be dispels. It seems as though the ability to dispel poison and disease is going to be pretty important in dungeons like Brackenhide Hollow and Halls of Infusion, and it will be interesting to see how this affects the healer meta over time. The good news is it's week 1, and it's going to be way more about just learning new mechanics and executing them than hitting any crazy healing or DPS checks for the vast majority of the player base. A holy priest that's watched a couple of YouTube videos about a dungeon is going to be a way better pick than a Resto Druid who forgot to update his bigwigs. As always, guys, bring the player, not the spec, and you're going to do just fine. So we have a new dungeon pool to suffer through, and with no actual live data on how successful players are at timing keys in the various new dungeons, it would be irresponsible to start ranking these dungeons this early in the season. Just kidding. So anyway, I asked my community what they thought would be the hardest of the new dungeons, and you guys said by far that Brackenhide was the one you were most worried about, likely because you have PTSD from Mythic Zeros and people getting 45 stacks of diseases because no one killed the totems. Guys, please kill the totems this week. Also, no one had the proper respect for Underrot, except for this guy. Looking forward to seeing how these dungeons really play out on live. We'll rank them next week. Alright guys, I waited as long as I could before recording this, but we still don't actually know exactly what the affixes will be next week as of the time of this recording. We do know that some changes have been made to affixes in general though. Beyond Fortified and Tyrannical, the first affix you'll get will come at Keystone level 7 and can be one of the 3 new ones: Afflicted, Incorporeal, and Entangling, or Volcanic or Storming. I'd be willing to bet there's a very good chance we get one of the new ones week 1, so let's go over all 3 really quick. For afflicted souls will appear periodically and need to be either dispelled or healed up by players. If they aren't taken care of, they'll get a cast off that will reduce haste for 100% for 10 seconds and act as a pretty painful reverse bloodlust. You can line of sight or outrange this spell at 55 yards, but for the most part, you're going to need to actively deal with these adds. Keep in mind that healing them needs to be direct. They will not benefit from passive healing. Incorporeal will spawn a maximum of 2 incorporeal adds at a time that will cast Destabilize, which will reduce damage and healing by 50%. Basically, these adds need to be hard CC'd for the 20-second duration of their sad little lives. Any hard CC will work regardless of its type limitations. If this turns out to be our affix of the week, make sure you're talented into your hard CCs like Hibernate, Shackle Undead, and things like that to take care of them. Finally, Entangling will spawn a plant under you that will slow you by 30%. You have 8 seconds to either move 10 yards away or use any movement impairing immunity, like Blessing of Freedom or Shapeshift to remove it. Pretty simple. The second set of affixes now gets introduced at Keystone level 14. It includes Bolstering, Bursting, Sanguine, Spiteful, and Raging. All stuff we've seen before. There's also no seasonal affix this season, and best of all, no more Thundering. I think in the tier list of the history of seasonal affixes for WoW Thundering would rate really low, and since Blizzard apparently doesn't want the seasonal affix to be a huge power spike to players, I think it's just as well that we don't have it at all. For the random thought of the week this week, let's talk about your approach to week 1 of a new season. Obviously, people are going to differ quite a bit here, but if your goal is to meet some specific score threshold, then your week 1 goal should really be to try and complete each dungeon once. Your first run in a dungeon, even at a very low key level, will give you a load of points, and have at least some score in all 8 dungeons should put you in a respectable spot compared to a lot of people right off the bat. Now obviously, the higher key level the better, and bonus points if you time it, but even some untimed score in the first week can be a nice boost to your dungeon score, and a way to kind of separate yourself from the pack early on. Beyond that, as usual, completing the highest key that you're able to is going to provide you with the best possible vault loot next week, so you are going to want to push yourself for at least 1 key to get those fat loots. You've also got to remember that no rewards are given out for highest week 1 Mythic Plus score. It's a long season. This is a time for patience. A lot of keys are going to get bricked, but you're best off sticking with them. Start figuring out what cooldowns work best for which mechanics and when the big healing events are. That's what will serve you the best in the long run. If you think you got a better handle on mechanics than most, this is a good time to speak up. Try to give your group a heads up on what to look out for on bosses or dangerous trash packs. If you want to be a super nerd like me, you can watch dungeon guides on one monitor while customizing your little wigs in the other to help you not miss important things as you learn the new dungeons, but obviously only a huge nerd would do something like that. That said, you guys do kind of come across as a bunch of huge nerds, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about this anyway, because as healers, I would recommend either doing this before the dungeons come out or after doing them a couple times. I think it's important to get notified before a big damage event comes out, so you have time to plan appropriately, and also to reduce the number of notifications you're getting for things that just aren't that important to you as a healer. Little Wigs does a pretty decent job of this right out of the box, but I still like to make some modifications. If it sounds like an ability is going to be really vital for you to know about as a healer, I prefer to go into the options and click emphasize so it shows up real big on my screen. I also like to go into the sound menu and choose a custom sound that will stand out from the default beeps and boops of Little Wigs that can become kind of easy to ignore after a while. My personal favorite is the bike horn. I don't feel 100% confident with the ones that I've made yet, because obviously we haven't done any keys on live, but once I feel really good about them, I will add them to the macros and UI section of my Discord so you can check them out there. To sum it up, the song remains the same in WoW, guys. Don't be intimidated by the new gearing systems. Doing the highest content you can, as much as you can, will put you in a position to do well. Good luck this week, guys. I hope all of your Mythic Plus dreams come true week 1. If you guys made it this far in the video, I always appreciate a thumbs up. And check out my stream right here on YouTube, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 9 p.m. Pacific, where we have tons of healing fun. Hope to see you there. Until next time, happy healing.